Tera Patrick is a trailblazer in both her life as an adult content creator, a model, an entrepreneur, and in her time as a traveler of the world and wellness expert. Raised in a military family and a mixed Thai and Caucasian heritage, she began modeling in her early teens after being scouted by the world-famous Ford models. Tera studied microbiology. Oh, gosh, I can't think of anything harder. I was terrible at biology at school, and worked briefly as a nurse before entering the adult film industry in 1999. With a prolific career spanning over 100 films, she gained iconic status for her performances, her production company TerraVision, and a string of accolades, including AVN Best New Starlet and the Best Actress Awards. She's hosted radio shows, appeared on mainstream TV, and remains active in content creation through platforms like Loyal Fans. Known for her commanding presence, Tera blends sensuality, business acumen, and cultural impact. She's also an author and mother, continuing to influence both fans and industry peers. Tera took the decision in 2015 to move to northern Italy, and is from there she regales with her tales of travel to the far-flung corners of the planet. Gosh, that's quite a lot. I hope we got enough time. Thank you so much for joining us today. You're incredibly kind. I know you're very busy. You're heading off on your travels again in a couple of days, so it's very generous of you to find the time to spend with me and with the audience.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for your time.
I'd like to start, if it's okay, by taking you back just a little bit, so to understand what were your teenage and formative years like. Do you think the person you were then would recognize the person you are today?
Absolutely. I think that the person, it's interesting. There's always a full circle moment. And in a way, I feel that I grew up in a pretty liberal household. My father is American, my mother's Thai. They met during the Vietnam War. And my parents, I was raised in Southern California. And when I say liberal, I mean I could go to my parents for anything. They were very open-minded. I could talk with them about anything. My father, we spent weekends camping and fishing. It was really important for my parents that my sister and I, am the oldest of four siblings, that they raised us to be strong, adaptable, empathetic, resourceful. And I feel like that was really integrated in us in our younger years. And we did a lot of driving and a lot of traveling. So, which is what I do now, more flying. But absolutely.
And were you able to talk about your body and puberty and your feelings, things with your family? How comfortable were you with your body and who you were at an early age?
I was pretty comfortable. I mean, I developed quite early. I already had size D breasts when I was 13 years old
Oh
in middle
gosh.
school, so that's definitely like, well, that was a bit, you're getting a lot of attention from both male and female sex, but I could absolutely talk with my father and my mother, and I think that's one of the things that is really important in your formative years, is that you have that
Mm,
open communication. I think a lot of the stigma and shame that circulates around sex and sexuality is often projected. It's projected by people who don't know how to process or how to kind of, I think, deal with that. I think it's often projected onto them, and then it's projected onto other people. A lot of that shame and stigma and closure
mm.
that we have about sexuality is something that's, I believe, taught.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? Because you sort of say that's taught, because I think the one thing, certainly in the UK, and I think from talking to people a lot in the US as well, is that we don't get, well, let me rephrase that. I think sex education at school
Hmm.
is certainly, I thought it changed since I was at school. I don't think it changed that much. It's very much fear driven. So
Yes.
don't get pregnant, don't get an STD. We were taught how to put a condom on a cucumber, always useful. But it's,
Better than
yeah,
a
there
carrot,
was
right?
no, well, absolutely, yeah. There was no, there was no talk, and still, according to my children, there's no talk about intimacy or desire or empathy towards a partner or feelings and things. It was always very much about the physical act. It was sort of, well, abstinence is best. If you can't abstain, then do this. And Yeah, I think that has set a lot of people up to feel very cautious, repressed, uncomfortable
Repressed.
about what they feel.
That's a
I
good
think
word.
that's really hard.
Well, I think that knowledge, going back to sex education, because we often face, we have a lot of the same issue in the US. And I
Mm.
believe that knowledge is power. When you know better, you do better. Or when you have the knowledge, you have access to so many things. And I think one of the first things when we talk about repression is to take away that knowledge. I think that the mentality is that if younger people don't understand how their bodies work, well, they're not going to do anything about it. Pleasure is our birthright. We should enjoy pleasure. We should have pleasure.
Mm.
And so I believe that taking that away from people, I mean, there's probably some bigger issues at play politically, but I think that that's something that's also taken away from people. Maybe it's a way to exert control. That's one of my
And that's
theories.
no, I think you're completely right, and I think particularly having for many many centuries a fairly male-dominated society, the information knowledge was particularly kept away from women. The
Hmm.
knowledge about their own bodies, it was kept away from them. And so, we both know about how long ago it was. It was less than 100 years ago. People could vote in the UK if they were women.
Yes.
And at
Have a
dinner
bank
parties,
account even, I believe.
oh, absolutely, yeah.
Can you
And at dinner
imagine?
parties, the men used to go away to talk, and the women were left to sort of tidy up and sort of talk about, I don't know, knitting and sewing and things. And yeah, there was a almost this fear that, well, if we share knowledge about whatever it is, we'll get people that can't handle the knowledge, or they might use the knowledge in the wrong way. But I do think, yeah, giving people facts and giving people knowledge, because certainly today people will look anywhere for, and I won't call it knowledge, but information.
Yes.
They'll go onto onto TikTok, they'll go on social media, they'll go wherever. And we all know that a lot of that information is bogus and
Hmm.
sometimes dangerous. So
Fear
actually,
driven, like you said.
it is talking about it in a sensible way from an education perspective feels so much more valuable. But yeah, I understand with the political narrative these days, we're in a different place right now. It'll evolve and change again, I'm sure. But
Well, I think
yeah,
some of the evolution has come in the form of, the adult industry, the sex industry, which is why I personally believe that when we spoke earlier about, I believe the adult industry has always really been ahead as far as technology.
oh gosh, yeah,
We've really set the bar. We've really set the tone and the pace and everything for technology and for a lot of the trends in sexuality, that happen. And so I feel like now that there's been a shift in platforms, self-producing platforms like
hmm,
Loyal Fans, that has completely shifted all of the power into our hands as performers and creators. And
yeah,
what you're seeing is a lot of resistance to that because you used to the industry was male dominated for many years with producers. I was one of the only few female producers only on, and we were met with a lot of resistance because it was like, well, how dare you, how can you produce your own content, how can you make content that's palatable for a larger audience besides cis white men. There's a whole narrative to that, but I really truly believe that now in the past 10 years, one of the biggest shifts with Pornhub and all of these hub channels has really shifted the power back into creators' hands. And that's why there's been so much, I think, backlash, even with the public, right? Because you have girls
yeah,
that are like 18, 19 years old that are like, I can make millions of dollars. And all I have to do is take my iPhone and film my, can I
yeah,
say vagina?
yeah.
Can I
You
say
can say
boobs?
whatever you want. Yeah,
And they're making millions. We're not talking about hundreds. I know that's a small percentage. I don't want to give the illusion that everybody's making millions of dollars, but you understand what I'm saying. This industry is a
yeah.
business. It's a billion upon billions of
Mm.
dollars being generated. And a lot of the younger generation is capitalizing on that. That's powerful. It's
It is,
scary.
it is, and it's really interesting what you say
Scary
about
for the
how
parents.
well, yeah, how far ahead the industry's been. So a lot of people don't realize that it was the it was the porn industry that really drove the adoption of DVDs and of
Yes.
Blu-rays and now of VR and now of streaming and now of
Yes.
platforms. You think about all the things out there. I think, well, yeah, they got there first.
In adult, and that has actually been how mainstream is actually always, I don't want to say copied, but they really have. They've learned a lot
Yeah, playing
from
catch up.
from
Yeah.
uh, from our industry. And what I was going to mention earlier, we were talking about the education. I think
Mm.
one of the alarming things that I've noticed from the 18 to 24-year-old demographic is so many of them got their education from these porn sites. And so that's why I believe that maybe had we given them, instead of a lot of people in higher authority been so resistant to sex education, been
Yeah.
so resistant to allowing them to absorb the information maybe in a more positive way or in a healthier way.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to dissuade or put people off or ban things just never works. You look at prohibition, you look at the sort of drug culture, you look at how marijuana now in the US is legalized in many more states, and sort of finally realize that actually, no matter what we do, this is not going anywhere. People want something, they find a way to get it.
Absolutely. And not in the
And
best way, not in
well, no, absolutely not. No,
the
you end up in this. This is it. You'd far rather go to a beautiful sort of pharmacy in Chicago rather than go down some back alley and try and find somebody called Josh to buy something from it. It's kind of weird. And apologies to anybody called Josh. It's not always Joshua.
It's always
Um,
Josh.
but so you began modeling at 13, which is it's an interesting age because you are at that time, like you say, you were developing and had developed. You are starting to think of feel different things, and I wonder what did exposure to the fashion industry. How did that impact your self image? Where you thought your career might go? What impact did that have?
Well, the impact I felt from modeling at such a young age, I actually started in 1994 at age of 15. And for me, I compare it to this TikTok generation. I grew
Hmm.
up overnight, being fed so much information at such an accelerated pace where you just have it at your fingertips, is it's just explosive. And the same thing happened to me. I flew off to Japan at 15 years old, and I was exposed to a whole different world, an adult world, at a very young, impressionable age. And so I really
Mm.
grew up fast. And it really is a sink or swim mentality. You really have to have your wits about you. I think it's also incredibly isolating. I do
Hmm.
remember feeling incredibly isolated. Also, you've got a young woman living and working in a completely different culture in Southeast Asian Japan and Southeast Asia. So I do feel like it instilled early on a lot of independence. I didn't really
Yeah.
have a lot of body image issues. I always knew I was different. So I was exploited for that very reason, right? I wasn't the cookie cutter supermodel. And then when I got into the adult industry, I wasn't the cookie cutter porn star. So I felt like maybe I was punishing myself, like silently. I went into two different industries where I was really the black sheep, but it almost worked for me in a good
Mm.
way. Not that I was unscathed. Of course, I never got into heavy drugs, but there was always alcohol, exposed to alcohol
Yeah.
at a young age, nightclubs, and sex early on, or sexual experiences, or probably experiences dealing with shifts in power,
Hmm.
older men being your agent, photographers.
Yeah. Yeah. And but then you came back from being overseas and you studied
Went straight into
microbiology.
education. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
which
had to
sounds
rewire my
incredibly
brain.
different. And then nursing, and so what? And is that where you thought your career was going to go?
Well, it was actually so when I had come back from modeling, I had spent a good chunk of my money. I had had a good time modeling, and it was my father who actually he did this two times in my life. He did this when I left modeling, fashion modeling the first time, and then when I got into the adult industry. And he gave me solid advice, which was you need to plan for your future. I
Mm.
don't think you're going to be modeling for much longer. You need to have a backup plan. What's your backup plan? Education. Education will never fail you. This is this, you may not be a nurse for the rest of your life, but it's a skill that you'll
Yeah.
have to pull yourself through. And he was absolutely right. So studying wasn't where I thought I would go, but I'm glad I did. I had the university experience for 4 years, which led me to Southern California, where I got discovered by Playboy. And that was the second time that my father said, okay, if you're going to go into this business, you need to dot your I's, cross your T's, learn how to manage your money better. I found that even if my father didn't agree with my choices, I could always go to him, ask him for advice, and here I told you so later. And he was right. I did end up telling him many, many years later. We had a conversation, and I said, I just want you to know you were right, Dad. You were right about everything. And he was like, can you record this into my iPhone? Wait, let me find my iPhone. I need this to be my ringtone. But it's true. I think that no matter where you are in life, having having somebody who, whether you're on the same wavelength or not, that can listen to you with empathy, listen to you
Yeah.
with, logic, and sort of help you and guide you. We all need that in our lives. We yearn for stability. We yearn for that. I think it's important to have. Definitely keeps us on a better path, I believe.
It does. And I think, yeah, as a father myself, and I do hope that I will recognize and reflect upon and stand by the decisions my son, but particularly my daughter, make, really, and then just always be there for them. There's no point. There's, I'd hate to think I would ever sort of say, well, you made a decision and you've got to live with it now. I think always being there, and like I say, you can give advice, but ultimately somebody's going to make their own decisions. And I think your father being there for you, it just shows what a good person he is. It's yeah. So when you were discovered by Playboy, did you envisage at the time it was going to be you're going to be a photographic model? Did you envisage it saying, no, I'm going to go straight into porn? What? Because it's quite a big step.
It is quite a big step. So in my memoir, Sinner Takes All, one of the
Mhm.
first chapters, I write about seeing Playboy magazine, of course, as a young girl. I was impressionable. I remember seeing, I believe it was Paulina Porzovka on the cover. She was a
Mhm.
supermodel. So in
Yeah.
my mind, I thought, ooh, Playboy is like a little bit, not the naughtier, cheeky version
Mm.
of fashion modeling. And then, of course, I had seen some, I think, is it Page Six girls? I mean, back then the UK was a lot more censored. So a lot
Mhm.
of the lad mags were just, breasts, or they were kind of what we call implied nude. And I thought, I can absolutely do that. And I had a modeling background. So I only anticipated doing nude modeling, which is what I had done for the first year. I was on a photo set for a magazine with a photographer named Suze Randall. Suze was she was the first photographer who launched my career. She photographed me for Penthouse, where I became a Penthouse pet, did a lot of magazines with her. And I got this offer to shoot a movie with a man by the name of Andrew Blake. And an iconic adult cinematographer. I really enjoyed the experience. It was a solo, female only shoot.
Mhm.
And I enjoyed the experience. It was just really a natural flow from modeling. The funny thing is, I transitioned into hardcore boy girl because I was actually more comfortable with men. I hadn't had female sexual experiences in my life prior to that scene that I had shot, that very first scene that I had shot. So I went to the agent at the time and I said, am I able to shoot with men? And I remember he dropped the phone at the time. His name was Jim South, and he dropped the phone at the time because he says nobody just jumps into shooting hardcore. No woman comes into my office and says they just want to shoot boy girl. It's like you've got to ease into it. But he picked up the phone, like two phones, and said, "I'm going to book you right now." And um, I think I shot close to 50 movies when I was independent at that time. And again, not to make a long-winded answer, but just sort of discovering myself in those early movies, my sexuality, really discovering that, wow, I was an exhibitionist. I enjoyed filming sex, not publicly, but in front of a
Hmm.
camera, kind of just becoming a different character in feature films, gonzo films at the time. I will say my active years, the year 2000 to the year 2003, were quite different. So, the production value was different. The time we took to shoot movies was a little bit longer.
Yeah.
It was, I don't want to say, like, to quote Robin Leach, it was like champagne dreams and caviar, but it definitely was, especially from what I'm hearing today. It was definitely a different time. I feel like I was in the golden era
Mm.
of adult.
And you were a sort of standout individual for your looks and your style and your physique and everything. I guess because you look back at the porn from then, it was fairly sort of standard
Yeah.
American beach blonde sort of thing. And I guess you had a really powerful niche that you could exploit.
I had a powerful niche. I had a very different look, and I had a different desire. My desire was glamour, full on glamour. I
Yeah.
wasn't really into shooting the hardcore. I've never denounced that, but it just wasn't my style. I can honestly say I've never shot anything or never done anything that I was regretful of or uncomfortable with. Like, I look back now in 2025, I'm comfortable with my body of work, but also when people always ask me, why did you stop? It was time. I don't know how long you can do something that physical. Obviously, there are different facets of the adult industry that are more labor intensive. Of course, you can't compare what I say, adult film work to webcamming, or webcamming
Mhm.
to phone sex or full service sex work. All of these are different, or being a masseuse, they're all different facets of the industry.
Mm.
But I compare it to being an athlete. You have a few good
Mm.
years, I feel like, physically, right? That you're in tip top shape. And I mean, you can only do pile driver. You can only do some of these positions for so long. But
Yeah.
I think it's important to maintain something else outside of this work because it is so labor intensive mentally and physically. You give up a big part of you.
Mm. Were you able to date during that time? So a lot of girls I've spoken to in particular said they always found it far easier to date within the industry for two reasons. One, that within the industry you're health checked on a very
Mhm.
regular basis, and then secondly, even though this is what they've said, somebody might, oh yeah, I'm fine with that. Some point they become less fine with it.
Sure.
So how did you find the personal side of life at that time?
I didn't really have a personal life early on when I was in the industry because I was so focused on making a future for myself. Now, I approached the industry a little bit different. I knew that I wasn't going to be in the industry for a long, long, long time.
Mm.
I felt like this was going to be a few chapters in my life, depending on which direction I wanted to go. And I feel like one of the things that I've seen over and over, especially in this industry, is that when you fall in love or when you get a partner, kind of to the tune of what you had mentioned before, things are great for a little while, but then when you separate, one, if not both of you, are often financially tied together. Then
Yeah.
you have to find your own way back to make all of that money again. You've lost 3 or 4 years, which is quite a long time in
Mm.
the industry. Think of like mainstream. I remember watching like the Oscars or something, and they were like, Sandra Bullock, her comeback. I'm like, she just made a movie a year ago. Like, did we all forget? Did we all
Yeah.
forget who she was in the span of a year? But that's how entertainment works. And in
Mm.
adult, you can be shot out within 3 to 6 months. So I always say you have to have your own life. You have to save your money. There'll be plenty of time when you're finished or when you get comfortable to find a partner. My issue is finding somebody who can relate to what you do because at the end of the day it seems cool and glamorous in the beginning, but I don't think the emotional aspect of it kicks in. I think everyone's drawn to the financial part of it.
Yeah.
especially the other person. They're like, hey, this
Yeah.
person's making a lot of money. They could fund my lifestyle. This is the lifestyle I've never had before. I mean, that's the reality of it. You will hear this
Yeah.
story over and over and over again. It happens to a lot of people, and so I feel like you cannot take this work back. You're always going to be out there for everyone to see. The choices that you make in that moment are going to impact your future, whether you like it or
Mm.
not, in a positive or negative way. So I really think it's important to just focus on working, saving. It can be incredibly isolating, but it can also be incredibly rewarding to wait for the right relationship, I think,
That's a
which is
great
what I have
answer.
now.
No,
It took
that
some
was a
time.
fabulous answer.
Sorry, I don't give short
Um,
answers.
no,
You're
I
gonna
love
have
it. I
fun
mean,
editing.
everything you said so far just makes me think how thoughtful and forward-looking you've been in everything you've done. And I do think a lot of people, not just in the adult industry, people in life in general, one year merge into the next, and the 5 years are gone, and 10 years are gone, and 20 years are gone. It's
Yeah.
like, gosh, yeah, I was going to do something, wasn't I, with my life?
Right.
And you end up for many many reasons. A lot of things are financial or emotional or relationship, whatever. A lot of reasons drive people to just accept the status quo. But you do seem to have been very rational and methodical and thoughtful in whatever you've done and what you've addressed. And is that, did you always think about going into producing and creating television? And how were the stresses and strains of being a
Ooh.
producer different from being a content creator?
So I went into producing, opening my own company, TerraVision, 3 years after I started in the industry, and this was
Hmm.
more of from the business side. For me, this was a way for me to own my entire catalog, for me to own future content, to make. I was trying to think of, okay, financially down the road, a lot of artists that produce their own music, they own their
Mm.
own publishing. This is the future.
Yeah.
This is how you secure your future. I think one of the biggest difficulties I faced as a producer were relationships. You've got couples who don't want to work together or they've had a fight that day, and then somebody's in a complete mess. I can't
Yeah.
do the scene. And,
Yeah.
there was drug use did run rampant, with quite a few performers. They were unable to perform. Definitely a lot harder for the men. I always say the men are the mechanics behind the job. I mean, the women can lay there with a migraine and kind of still get through the scene as long as you're looking beautiful, but the men really have to focus and put their will and their drive in, so to speak. So that there were some challenges. I remember getting phone calls the morning of, I can't make it. My boyfriend and I have had a fight. He doesn't want me to work today. And I thought, okay, do I talk her off the ledge or do I just hire someone else and salvage the whole production?
Yeah.
I think just not realizing, back to what we mentioned earlier about the business being a business. I've got a lot of money invested in these movies. I've got people who have families who are counting on this income. I can't
Mm.
cancel a production. And so there have been a few movies, I won't name which, where I had to replace the star or I had to replace some of the cast, and the script kind of took a different turn from what I initially intended. But again, I think one of life's most important skills is being adaptable and being resourceful, right? Not panicking and not letting, can't panic in porn. Can't happen. Or everything just
It's
goes,
funny.
meow.
Yeah, it's funny 'cause I think a lot of sort of late teen, early 20s guys think, oh god, that'd be a fabulous job, just going in there, having
I
sex with
can
all these
do
beautiful
that.
women, how fabulous they are, it'd be incredible. But then, and again, when I've talked to people before, they're like, okay, when you watch I don't know, 30-minute scene or whatever, and realizing that that's taken 6 hours to film, it's been stop, start, get hard again, get right, take another Viagra, do whatever, etc., get fluffed up, and it's not. Yeah, and all the women I talked to sort of said, oh, it's much harder for the guys. But
Yes.
you would think, as in the sort of stereotypical young man sort of way of thinking, oh god, that'd be great, I'd love to do that. And I'm sure a lot of men want to do it, but just can't do it. And then can't do it on command. It's hard. Well, sorry, it's not
It's
hard.
hard. It's hard, and it's
Challenge,
well when
isn't
it's
it?
not hard, it's hard.
Yeah, yeah, it
That's the
is.
motto. But it's also let's focus for a second on the mental aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that as glamorous as it sounds, as fun as it sounds, I don't think future you understands the impact that it may have down the road.
Hmm.
Again, it's not a job that's highly relatable. Maybe with some people who are more open-minded or maybe more liberal or who also can see you aside from the
Mm.
persona that you are. But I personally could not marry or date someone in the industry. I'm able to compartmentalize, if that's the correct word, and go to work for the day and film, but I'm not going to lie, there is an emotional aspect of
Mm.
it for me. I'm with someone, I'm engaging in a very intimate act, even though it's being filmed. I'm not a robot, And so for me, I don't think, and I know, I shouldn't even say I don't think, I know I can't go home to my partner and separate those two. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not saying I want to date my coworker. I don't know if it's coming across
Yeah.
correctly, but
Yeah.
you understand what I'm saying. Like, something
I do.
intimate for me has taken place,
Hmm.
and I wouldn't be able to just go home then and be like, okay, honey, you know,
What's for
how was your
dinner?
day? Well, my day
Yeah.
was, and some people can. And I think that in my humble opinion, I think that there's a level of disconnect there, but maybe not. We sometimes, what's the word? We sometimes, I don't know if denounce is too strong of a word, what we don't understand. Just because I can't do that doesn't mean that somebody else can do that and have a healthy relationship. It's possible.
Mm.
I had a
Hmm.
girlfriend who was a dominatrix, no sex involved, but she was able to whip and beat someone and then take her kids to soccer and serve popcorn and whatnot. And I would have to decompress from that for quite a while. I don't
Yeah.
think that I would be able to emotionally switch that on and off
Mm.
as easily.
No, I can completely understand that, and I think a lot of people fear what they don't understand.
Yes,
So
fear.
if you don't understand something, it's like, oh gosh, it's something to be fearful of, and I want
Or
it's a
jealous,
very
right? Because jealousy
yeah
and
I think
envy are
yeah.
also viable emotions here at the end of the day. My partner being intimate, even if I'm looking and I'm seeing that it's being filmed and that there's, they're having a good time and there's dialogue and it's a production, there's gonna be jealousy there.
Of course there
Absolutely,
is.
there'll be
Yeah.
jealousy there. There's that's that natural instinct and feeling inside
Mm.
you that this is your partner, this is somebody that you care for.
And this next question is a very big question, and I'm not asking you to
I'll have
talk
a
on
big
behalf
long
of the
answer.
entire world. Yeah, so I just wondered, from your point of view, what impact do you think that porn and adult content has on society? And let me just premise that a little bit. So I think the average age now at which I think people see porn is sort of 12 or 13, and
Oof.
typically young boys, etc. A lot of the clip names as such on Pornhub and YouPorn or whatever they are they're all quite strong, and I guess it's because they want attention. But it'll be so and so hammered or destroyed or railed or whatever.
Yeah.
None of them sort of say, gently made love to. It's and I know the clip sites are very different because they get 4 billion hits a month, which is extraordinary. That's not people finding it by mistake. That's people that are going looking for it. But you have other porn. I talked to a fabulous feminist porn director called Inka Winter, talking about the
Hmm.
films she makes, and they are beautiful films. They are cinematic quality. It's still hardcore porn, but it's just more from what might a woman
Her
get turned on
perspective and
by.
her,
Very
yes,
turned
her.
on. I get very turned on watching them as well, but for a woman as well. So I just wonder what. Yeah, as I said, it's a very big question, and I'm not expecting you to answer for the whole industry. But what impact do you think porn and adult content has on society?
Well, I will get sliced and diced because of course, my views have changed over the years. Um, I always preface this with the industry was fantastic for me. My
Yeah.
experience within the industry as a producer and a performer was a good experience. But
Hmm.
now at my age and where I'm at in my career as an independent producer, where I do clips and I have an account on Loyal Fans, and I do mostly chatting and interacting with my fans, but more on a softcore level. I do get those messages. I get messages where men have told me I was 8 or 9 years old. And I'm always like, whoops, we're going to back up. We're going to add a one and we're going to say 18, 19. It's alarming to me. It's not a turn on
Yeah.
for me to hear that. Not because I feel old, but because to me, I don't know why telling me you were of that age experiencing sexuality with me is just not a turn on. I I've always maintained that the adult industry is for adults. I do think we need stricter protocols, age verification. We absolutely do. It's not appropriate. It's not appropriate for sex education. It's not appropriate for the underdeveloped brain of somebody so young to be taking in this information. It's just not healthy, and I think that it's absolutely it's impressionable, right? And that's kind of back to what I said earlier about a lot of these younger content creators. They aspired to be porn stars because they started
Mm.
looking at this so young, which I don't think it's healthy, because I think that the allure for them was only financial. I don't think they really saw it in a well-rounded way. And the other half of me has always maintained that we shouldn't even be allowed to perform in the industry until the age of 21. I think 18 is way too young. I think from 18 to 21, the impact of, even viewing porn, I think that so many men have these unreasonable expectations that they put on their partners, that they put on women, that they put on, or it could be men too, from porn. Porn is fantasy. It's not reality. And I think that the industry has the trajectory, it's just gotten so hardcore that partners are treated indisposably. Even see, it's this impression of looking at something, to me, that's, I mean, not that there's not good stuff out there, but there's
Yeah.
incredibly violent and aggressive stuff. And I don't think that this is healthy. I don't think a lot of men view this and it doesn't stay with them. I think that it sort of changes them biologically. No, I think that their brain hungers for something more and more and more. It just becomes excessive. It's like people aren't as satiated, if that's the
Yeah.
correct word, as they were before. We're always looking for something more extreme, and I blame porn. I blame porn for that. I do see the negative impact. I don't want to say I've seen a positive impact, because I think that the positive impact from porn would be a couple watching and enjoying it together and
Mm.
taking away that, okay, that was fun for us tonight and that was fun for our sex life tonight, and then we'll move on and they share an intimate, loving, or cool relationship. But
Yeah.
I have seen more of the negative, and that's been reflected, which is what a lot of the, I mean, that's been reflected in the interactions that I've had with a lot of new fans. I can really see the difference, especially in age, and I can really see the difference in fans that view porn from this era versus fans that view porn from my era, if that
Mm.
makes sense. Whew.
It does very much so. I mean, my era was that porn was stumbling across you as a Penthouse Pet or as or a Playboy magazine, or seeing that. I think, my God, it's a naked woman. Oh my God, it was
Yes.
so
And the
exciting. And a lot of
allure
those
and
were
the
like, a
mystery.
lot of those were sort of simulated nudity. It was like the leg crossed over and you couldn't quite see anything, and the arm over the nipples, whatever. And it's like, oh my
Yes.
God. And that was as far as it went, really. But yeah, I've got female friends that date quite a bit younger than they are, and they say that when I talk to them, that they notice it's quite different now, that things like choking and hair pulling are just seen as that's just standard. And then my friends also turned around and said, "What the hell are you doing?" I said, "Well, I thought everybody liked this," and the assumption that all women have no hair below their neckline,
Oh,
and
yes. That we're
and
groomed a
it's
certain way.
yeah, and that all vaginas look a certain way, and that all men should have a 8 or 9 inch penis and be able to be hard for an hour. yeah, it's terrible.
Well,
It's
that goes
terrifying,
back
really.
to the unexpected, or that goes back to the projected, you know, it's fantasy, right? And so many men will
Yeah.
use adult creators as the standard. And unfortunately, I think there's also a line being crossed, because I can remember that when you watched a DVD or when you were looking at early scenes of mine on my website, I was not there to interact with you. That was purely a solo experience.
Mhm.
Now you have men online 24 hours a day trying to spend any amount of money to interact with someone that they become obsessed with. And I
Yeah.
think social media kicked off some of that. And I do think that the ability for fans, it's a positive and a negative. You know, I
Mhm.
enjoy interacting with my fans, but you have to be very firm about your boundaries. I think it becomes then a safety issue, and it becomes really unhealthy because you've now formed a parasocial relationship with someone who really only sees you as an ATM, or really only sees you as disposable yourself. You know, the way men think that they can speak to a woman, right? They've
Mm.
interacted with a woman on OnlyFans or Loyal Fans or wherever it may be for 2 hours, and he's calling her every name in the book, and he's throwing every fantasy at her. Then he goes back in real life and he's trying to date and wonders why it's completely silent out there. No woman wants to be spoken to like that. I mean, I'm just saying, right? Am
No,
I
yeah,
wrong here?
absolutely. No, absolutely
I
not.
mean, I don't know if I walked up to your wife and said, you know, hey, do you do anal? Or hey, I don't, I mean, she'd be revolted. It's just not a way to
Yeah.
talk to a woman. It's not a way to talk to a lady.
No.
And I see that happening. There's a loneliness epidemic, I think, with men and women.
Oh, there is 100%, and I think stats, the data shows it that I don't know, 3 out of 10 men don't have a best friend. 39% of people don't speak to someone in the daytime, and we're seeing far more single person households. All of those things, and I do have a. This is maybe for a different conversation, but I do have a real issue with how social media has taken away, in some respects, the ability to have a conversation. We were talking before about going out walking our dogs, and we
Yeah.
actually get to talk to somebody in person. And generally, dog walkers aren't walking along looking at their phone. They might listen to a podcast or music, whatever, but they're generally out there in fresh air walking the dog. I mean, you can talk to somebody about it. But I think a lot of people, if you sort of said, "Yeah, right, go and talk to that person,"
Yeah.
they'd really struggle with it. And we have so much online dating now, which is wonderful for many people. But again, it it doesn't compare to the nervous tension you feel about walking over to a woman, a girl in a nightclub when you're 18,
The
19, when I was doing
anticipation.
it. Oh my
She gonna
God.
say
Oh
no?
my God, what she can do, what she can do. And but my biggest one of my biggest wishes is that I could go back and tell that 18, 19-year-old kid, it's like just go and ask her. What's the worst that could happen? Just don't
Right.
spend 2 hours trying to debate it because somebody else is going to torture her and you've missed goodness knows what. But yeah, that fear, I think, was the big thing when I was younger. Whereas now, like I say, it's very, very different. So, and I was going to ask about that, about managing fan expectations. And I guess the one of the positive with loyal fans and other platforms is that you can block somebody, you can turn them off, you can choose not to talk to
Can't
them.
do that in real life. I wish we could. I wish we could just
Yeah,
spam people,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah. So I guess in some ways you well, in many ways you are really controlling what you share, what you talk about, what you're comfortable talking about, which I think is a really good thing, that the control does sit back with the creators. And I talked to another adult content creator actually called Tera Winters, and she was saying to me that yeah, she always hopes that porn is seen as entertainment and not
Mm-hmm.
education.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like, and you said before about being athletes. Like when I watch the Olympics, I don't assume that my girlfriend can run 100 meters in 10 seconds. I don't assume that she can pole vault. But with porn, I sort of watch it and think, well, of course they can do that. It's weird, isn't it? 'Cause it's the same thing in a way. It is a very you're looking at the professional people performing this. You're not
Right.
looking at yeah, you're looking at the Olympic version of it.
Well,
We don't
who stands
expect people
there?
to be able to run and sprint and stuff. Yeah, it's weird.
I mean, I think of when you've had, okay, we will go back to 18 for a second, and we'll think
Mhm.
about that really wild, passionate sex we had when we were there, right? How long did you last? Was it once in a while? Maybe you lasted an hour. Are you really doing these positions and motions for two to
Oh
three
my
hours?
god.
Absolutely not. And so
No.
think think about it. And then the way the man has to hold his arms back so that it's not blocking the penis, and the way a
Yeah.
woman has to constantly arch her back. I don't arch my back in real life. I would give anything not to arch my back. I'm also not, poking my bum out all day when I walk. So a lot of these unnatural positions that take place for 2 to 3 hours at a time, it takes a lot out of you. You are sore. It definitely
Yeah.
takes a lot out of you. And going back to what you said about a minute ago, I personally feel that the fan interactions, what I love about them, and some of the most wonderful fan interactions I've had have been with people who've had partners. And I remember
Mhm.
one of them telling me, one of the reasons why I come on here is because my wife doesn't like anal. And I said, well, how do you know? He goes, well, I just know she doesn't. I said, have you ever asked her? Well, no. I mean, I just come on here and get that. I said, why don't you ask her? Why don't you talk to her? Yeah. What would be your advice? Ask her, like communicate with her, talk with her. I said, how long have you
Yeah.
been married and you've never had this conversation? Well, I'm afraid to. So it goes back to the rejection. It goes back to the fear of thinking that the person you've decided to be with might not like something. So you're going to a place where what you feel or with certainty that you won't get rejection.
Yeah.
We can't live our lives like that. Rejection is a part of life. Hearing no is a part of life. And I think that unfortunately with porn, the impact that it's also had on society is that it's taught society, like social media, now. You can have it now. You can have it any way you
Yeah.
want. It's instantaneous. You're going to get off in 2 minutes. Not really. I love an orgasm, but an orgasm is like Jenna Jameson said this, the period at the end of the sentence. All of that stuff going through it is wonderful. Enjoy it. Take
Yeah.
your time. Like smiling. I always say if you don't want to go up to someone, a smile can be
Mm.
is everything. I smile at people all the
Yes.
time. It could change the whole trajectory of their day. If I know I'm walking
It
into the
does.
Italian post office, I already know it's going to be difficult. I smile because I know that instantly all of those unpleasantries are going to be turned off or at least put on
Mm.
pause for me. Coming across empathetic and genuine. I would really like to see adult content shift this way and have a bit more of a positive impact. I do think we need to dial back what we expose people to.
Yeah. I do think people would engage with that thing. And there's a reason when somebody strips, whether it be just our partner taking off their clothes or whatever, we do tend to watch that as opposed to if they walk in the room naked, it's already there.
Yeah,
It's in your face.
exactly.
Really.
It's
If somebody's actually taking off their clothes slowly and seductively, or not even just taking them off, it's fabulous because it's anticipation, it's that build up, it's that narrative really.
and it
Um,
biologically also changes your perception. I think it also changes you, when we've always been given something instantaneously, there's
hmm,
almost some violence there, right? When we're met with no. It's always
yeah,
like if you're always giving somebody, money and then all of a sudden it's like cut off, they're like, nope. I've
yeah,
always had it, we can't stop the gravy train. So I feel like porn is the same way. That's why I feel like a lot of people just aren't satiated anymore
mm,
because they've been given what they want so quickly
mm. Yes, you wonder
without
why it
having
could
to work
end.
for it.
I know. I thought it was really, really interesting when you said about somebody talking to you and saying, "Oh gosh, I come here because my wife doesn't like anal," without ever asking. And I had this similar conversation with a dominatrix in Romania. She's quite young, like 25, and she's beautiful, and she's saying that a lot of nearly all the men that come to her, it's not necessarily about the sexual side of things in a way. It's just they just want to be submissive for an hour,
Mm.
just to forget about being CEO of a company or a head chief banker or a finance officer or whatever. They just want to come in there and just be submissive. And she says always it's oh, but I can never ask my wife to do this.
Mhm.
And she doesn't say to them, well, why don't you? Because it turns down her business, I guess. But it's that whole thing about we do, whether a relationship's been going for a month or 6 months or 30 years, we sometimes have the experience we have in the beginning, we have the sex that we have, and And we change over
Yeah.
20 years. We change what we feel, what we like, what turns us on, all those things. But somehow the person that we're in bed with every night sometimes seems to be the hardest person to actually talk to.
Right?
Because then maybe there's that fear that this you're putting such a lot at stake by having this conversation. But I think there are different ways to have the conversation rather than having had something in your head for sort of 3 or 4 years about, oh, yeah, I'd love to for you to tie me up and walk on me with high heels, whatever. I have a fear that a lot of men just suddenly burst out with it in the middle of night,
Of
but
dinner,
rather than
a dinner
yeah,
party,
rather than
or
saying,
when
look,
the
I just
in-laws are visiting. Can you imagine?
rather than sort of saying to your partner, look, I'd really like to have a conversation just to check in and we're both feeling happy and stuff. Maybe let's talk about it tomorrow night. Let's just have dinner and we'll have a
Mm,
conversation. And let's just hear each other without making a comment, positive or negative. Let's just hear each other.
mm,
And what I'm saying isn't a negative towards you. It's not a negative towards me. I'm just some things I want to talk about. And that's the approach, I guess. And that's where a lot of times I do think sex therapists or sex coach or guys, whatever, having that almost neutral body involved can be a big help, I think, because it can be hard after
sure.
20 years to say, oh, that thing we've always done, I've never liked it. Or
Right.
that
Or all of the
I've never been,
sudden,
I've never been satisfied by this, or I've always, and I think, sorry, I'm talking a lot now,
yeah,
and I think the other thing is that, and you've clearly explained this, I think, which is really good. I do think if we exchange the word sex for pleasure,
hmm
I think things would be a lot different because sex still generally is thought of, you know, penis and vagina, PIV. That's
only
generally what sex is.
intercourse.
Yeah,
Hmm
and we always talk about even the words. We talk about foreplay. Right? Here's these things we do before sex. Let's just get that out of the way. Then we'll have the sex. Then we'll orgasm. And a lot of times, pleasure can be brushing your partner's hair or stroking
Yes.
her neck or rubbing his leg or looking at each other, for goodness sake, can be incredibly pleasurable. It doesn't have to be right. It's got to be sex or nothing. I
Right.
think that's one of the big things I think that would help. I know there's a question there. I just
Well,
said lots of things now. Sorry.
I'm agreeing with you because I believe that that's what porn is counterproductive for. And I'm not making this a bash porn, but again, when I
Yeah, yeah.
see the impact of how porn changes couples or how porn impacts society, what we're seeing is that what you've just explained is what so many wives and women want. We are not, I understand that men have they have a different sex drive as going into, different phases of life. I remember, you know, and of course you don't believe everything that, someone tells you online, but I would have men say, oh, but my drive is just so high. My wife just doesn't give me enough sex and blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, do you give her any attention? Well, I'm horny, da 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 da. Well, maybe if you sat down with her, played with her a little bit, and warmed her up a little bit, instead of just bam, 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 she would be more receptive to that. Oh, yeah, that could be. So the fact that it hasn't even entered in your mind tells me that it's about your pleasure. It's about your getting off. It's about your drive, which again, men are biologically wired differently. And porn really feeds into that. And porn really
Mm.
caters to that because it teaches a lot of men that we're insatiable sex dolls with open mouths who never say no. So I think that back to what you're saying, the intimacy is so important and these conversations are important, but I think there's still so much shame around things that we like. Although
Mm.
porn also has normalized over the years, we've normalized a lot of fetishes, right? A lot of things before, like BDSM,
Mhm.
even in mainstream media. I can't remember the name of the movie, but talking about S&M, talking about bondage, domination, a lot of these things kind of
Yeah.
came out in the open, and people were like, you know what, I'm really into that. And it's like, oh, okay. It's also a form of escapism. I think that a lot of men that do seek out someone to dominate them for a while, I think that maybe, I don't know if it's something that they're truly into or if it's just more of something that they need to escape into,
Mm.
something that they need to do for themselves. And then when they go back home, they can kind of have a clear mind. I think that life really life's the fuck out of all of us, kids, jobs, even
Yeah.
dogs, everything. And like you said, sometimes coming home, Your wife may be like, we need to talk, but the husband's like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Timing.
Yeah, it is funny how our brains. I know they sort of say men and women are the same, but I do think our brains work very differently in this respect. I mean,
Mm,
I think for when I again talk to women and they'll sort of say, look, one of the biggest turn ons for me when I feel close to my partner is if I come home and the rubbish is out and he's cooked dinner, he doesn't want to cook dinner, he's read the
yeah.
kids a story and put them to bed, and he washed up the dishes. I've never felt so close to him when he does that.
Yeah.
Whereas the guy's thinking, oh, I just want a blowjob. And it's such a
Yeah.
weird thing, isn't it? So you think, well, this is little things, and the guy's thinking, well, why that wouldn't turn me on. It's just this level of intimacy that you're showing towards a partner. You're giving them
It's
something of yourself.
nurturing. It's a
It
different form of
nourishing. It
nurturing.
is
It's
absolutely.
also thoughtful. If you think about it,
Yeah,
for women, their mentality would be, wow, that was very thoughtful. You made my life easier tonight. You
yeah.
made it so that I could sit here and stare off into space for 2 hours if I want to. And a man, and I will say this, ladies, it is important that, what, even if you're feeling tired every now and then, it's so important to find out what your partner's, I guess they call it love language, but what his nurture language is. For some men it is just put a glass of wine in his hand when he comes home. For some men it is just cook him a nice meal. For some it is just give him a blowjob once a week. But that's what's important, to keep both
Hmm.
of the bonds there, and I think also eventually the lines of communication constantly open. We are going to
Hmm.
have secrets, we are going to have our differences, we're going to have things that we're into, and we don't have to share everything, but I think the connection is so important. And for me, if I look back, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, on 2 decades that I've been in the industry, for 2 decades, that is something strangely that I've taken away recently, is that I have fulfilled, there's nothing left unfulfilled for me. I don't believe in having regrets. I don't like having regrets. I do feel that the reason why I have a really healthy marriage and a good relationship with my husband is that I feel it's almost made me intuitive, like to his sexual needs, but also to his emotional needs.
So what does what does intimacy look and feel like to you now? Now you're happily married with a daughter, and you're living a very different life. What does it mean to you now?
Well, we take trips. We make it a point to travel. We pick a destination in August, and we go away for 1 month, and we spend time planning this together. And this is such an exciting adventure for us. And I would say every day, and this was something that took me a few years of being married to finally kind of understand, was that I do offer my husband, I say, what can I do for you today? Is there anything that I could do for you today? I will come to him and be physically intimate with him. It's just rolling over and holding each other, touching each other, rubbing feet together. I always make it a point to offer something to him, whether it's sex, whether it's food, whether it's something, because I feel like that offering, it's like, wow, thank you. Thank you for wanting to do something for me in any capacity. I think that's really important.
Every man listening now is clipping that up, sending it to their wife.
But it
Look,
works
look,
both
this is what
ways,
Tara does.
right?
Look,
It works both ways. I
well,
mean,
absolutely, yeah,
because I think that we forget. I think that, my husband's a defense attorney. Actually, he had no idea who I was. We met when I first came to Italy. I had been offered a job. I used to do feature dancing. I used to do feature shows in discos and nightclubs. And I was doing a show in a local city about 1 hour from where we live now. And he walked into the club to actually serve one of his clients some papers for his trial,
yeah. Yeah, that's what he said.
because
Yeah.
he's like, I'm at the nightclub, come serve me here. And my husband's like, okay. And he sees on the wall American porn star Tera Patrick, and he's like, American porn star, what's this? What's going on here? Like, this never happens in Italy. This is going to be, it looks like a big event. There's tons of people here. So he stayed and he watched my show. And he came up to me and he offered me, he said, "Can I buy a bottle of champagne and we could just sit and talk for the night?" And I broke my rule. I said, "This man's really handsome. He seems really nice." And we had a bottle of champagne and we spoke, we had a great conversation. He knew I was new to Italy and he offered, he said, "Hey, I'd love to take you around. I'd love to show you, I'm from here. This is my neck of the woods." And we met for dates, nothing sexual, but he showed me this beautiful city that I was living in and kind of opened it up to me. And so I think that abstaining was also something that I did differently in this relationship, and it made a world of difference. That anticipation, finally, when it came, it was definitely different.
How wonderful.
Yeah, there you go. Ta-da!
Yeah, good on him for having the balls to walk up to this amazingly beautiful woman in a nightclub and say, "Hey, let's get a bottle of champagne. Let's just talk."
Well, I had my reservations. I will say one of the reasons I took those few months, it was really important to get to know each other. And of course, when you're dealing with someone of what I call a high emotional intelligence, they also value and want to protect their integrity and their, preservation as well, right? If that's the right word. I mean, he also was like, "I don't know this woman, but I know she's here and she's alone and she's brought her daughter. And, if anything, I could show her some of the best parts of my country. And if we find love along the way, we find love along the way." And it grew into that. But it was, for me, I thought that was one of the reasons why after I left the industry, I did move abroad. I knew that I had a better chance, so to speak, of engaging with someone not on that celebrity level. I
Mhm.
don't really get bothered here in Italy. I mean, I'm also not a soccer player or, someone, maybe an Italian actress. I'm
Yeah,
not, Monica Bellucci. But at the end of the day, most people who have recognized me here, they go on about their day. It's a very different type of culture here compared to
yeah.
what I was dealing with in Los Angeles and other parts of the US. And so I
Mm.
felt like I was having some genuine, undisrupted interactions here. And that'd be my advice if you want to, I
Mm.
think that probably the same thing for the Beckhams, using them as an example, getting out of where it was constantly chaotic
Yeah,
and
yeah,
raising your
yeah.
family and just having a
Mhm.
coffee and peace. And
Yeah.
for me, it's not somebody yelling out, "I saw you in Asian Vixens part 15,"
Yes. What was it that made you start thinking about, I'm going to go on these amazing adventures, and I want to start talking about it, and I want to sort of guide people, and I want to bring people into this? Because, yeah, I can't necessarily see the similarities between travel and what you did before, but travel does seem to be such an important part of your life.
Yes. So
So yeah, how did it come about that? And I'll put the links to your website and your blog and stuff, because it's found some
thank
stunning pictures.
you.
You've been to some stunning places,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, it's just really interesting.
Well, so when I first started working in the industry at the end of 1999, so I always say 2000, a lot of girls were buying handbags and they were buying like lots and lots of things. I went on trips. I always have loved to travel ever since I was young. History was my favorite subject, not biology. And I would stare at the globe and I would stare at maps and I said, "I want to go here and I want to go
Oh,
there."
gosh.
I just wanted to see the world. And that's what porn allowed me to do. That's what the industry allowed me to do. It allowed me to travel. Now, my reason for wanting to transition out of adult into travel blogging is kind of the same reason that I want to provide for people, and it's escapism. Traveling allowed
Yeah.
me to escape. I would make some money. I would do a 3 or 4 month feature dancing tour. I'd shoot 1 or 2 movies and I would be exhausted. So I'm like, I'm going to Australia for 3 months. And that 3 months that I trekked from, Sydney to Melbourne to Daintree to the Whitsundays all the way to Perth allowed me to escape. People weren't bothering me. I didn't have my responsibilities. Well, then I'd get broke. I'd be broke and I'd have to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back and start working again. But, the reality is we all want something to pour our time and attention into. We want to escape a little bit, and that's what travel provides. And so I'm
Mm.
hoping with my blog, Travel with Tara, that I can provide that for people, and that with the places that I've been, I'm trying to write from a more ethical, sustainable travel perspective because I think it's really important that we leave the places we visited
Yeah.
with absolute humility and gratitude. So I do put links in there as well, not necessarily to earn commission, but more because I want people to stay and experience. I think just some of the places that I've seen that I think would be helpful to the local communities, but also, provide a more economical and good experience. And then you get to escape and
Do you,
enjoy
do
and see how other
you,
people live.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have a favorite place you visited?
So far, it's been Thailand. And
Okay.
it's extra special for me because I,
Yeah.
I waited until I was 40. I'm going to turn 49 in 2 days. I waited till I was 47 years old to go. I always wanted to go with my mother,
Mm.
but my mother's never returned after giving birth to me. She never returned back to Thailand. It was quite painful for her, and she didn't have a connection to the country anymore. I think she really,
Yeah.
once she moved to America, she assimilated, and that's been her life. And so, once I realized my mom wasn't going to go back with me, I said I have to come back here. I have to see where she's from. I have to see this wonderful country, and so I do feel a deep connection. But if I can recommend one place that I think everyone should experience or where everybody should go, Africa. I absolutely think a safari is like
Mm.
the ultimate experience, and being in nature with animals is it's it's really grounding, and I think it just offers you a lot of gratitude, right? To see sort of a new place that's still wild and untamed and quite developed in some areas, but still, I think the heart of Africa, the country, is still
Yeah.
deeply, deeply there.
Mm. And I think, and Thailand is an example. I mean, it's very, very possible to experience Thailand in two completely different ways.
Yeah,
You can go to the incredibly tourist and maybe sort of slightly darker places in Thailand. You can go to somewhere that's so beautiful and picturesque, and the beaches are virgin beaches, and the sea is so incredible. Yeah, so I
and the
think you'd like to see if
mountains.
you, yeah, if you're mindful about how you experience somewhere, you can experience because people say, "Oh, I've been to Thailand, I've been to Bangkok, whatever." It's not really the same. Really, you've got to
Go deep into the
you
country
have
and
and try and feel the essence of a country really. And I do think I've long thought that travel helps people empathize more with people from different
absolutely.
backgrounds. And I think so. A lot of people, I think America has this challenge in a way. It's surprisingly low number of people in America actually have a passport because
It's
they can go to
true.
Canada, they can go to Mexico, they can go to the Bahamas, Caribbean, whatever, without a passport. And then a lot of Americans will come to Europe and do 19 countries in 4 days or whatever.
That's the
And when they're
kicker for
65,
me. Like
and
how?
it's yeah. But I think if you go and see people and you meet them in their own country, in their homeland, whatever, I just think our views of things just become different. Because we can see something on the news and it feels so alien to us, but actually going to a country and experiencing how people live and their their happiness at different things and what brings them joy, etc., is just so different with them from a very, I guess, traditional sort of westernized culture in particular. I
Well,
found that traveling out to Japan and Vietnam and places like that, and then parts of Africa and stuff. It's very different when you meet people in their countries and see
yes.
what it is to live as a native.
It also takes you out of your comfort zone, which
It
again,
does.
it does not sit well with a lot of people. I think that one of the funniest things that I always experience, and I've been here in Italy for 10 years, is that when I meet American people and the things I hear them complaining about are so trivial to me, but it cracks me up because I feel like they just really complain that they're so uncomfortable. I mean, taking the stairs is not so difficult. This place is my home is actually 600 years old. Where are we going to put an
Wow.
elevator? I
Yeah.
mean, it's undoing And back to when we spoke off camera and I mentioned, I think my biggest fear when I first came to Italy out of everything was learning the language. I knew I
Yeah.
was going to have to retrain and reprogram my brain because that's what language does. You're having to communicate differently the way
Mhm.
somebody else does, and expecting somebody to always do it for you in your language in your
Yeah.
way. These are just behaviors again that are taught and that are learned. And so when we go somewhere place else and we hear somebody speaking a different way, and this is just a minor example, but it's major because it takes people out of their comfort zone. All of a sudden they can't communicate, and it's humbling. So I
Mhm.
think that's also why the US is quite polarized when it comes to travel, because they're so afraid of going to some place that's going to humble them a little bit, or that's going to make them a little bit uncomfortable. But that's where growth happens. And growth is
Yeah,
so
I think
important.
yeah, I think there's almost an expectation that they're going to see a Disneylandification of a country. So they're going to see Italy, but it's going to be like the Disneyland version of it. It's going to be everything is clean and polished, and it's all the queues are all managed. And you can get Coke anywhere, and you can get and
Or
it's
the
but
glasses. My girlfriend always goes, "Why are the glasses so small?" I'm like, "You're drinking out of a vase. Why are you drinking out of a
I
vase?"
know,
I
but
mean, it's
yeah,
insane. Like,
I
nobody
know when
needs 60 ounces of coffee. I mean,
no when I was lucky enough to work out in America for a couple of years, and I when I came back and I couldn't sort of get the big gulp 64
yeah.
hours. What's going on? You get a coffee, and it's like, here's a coffee. That's not a coffee. That's like a thimble. But really, coffee is it's yeah, it's very different.
One of
I've taken
my,
up a lot of your time, so I've got two more questions. If
oh
that's
yeah, of
okay.
course, of course.
So one is it's actually a two-part question. So it's maybe three questions. So one is what are your plans and hopes for the future, and what do you do to nourish your own mental and physical well-being?
Oh, well, actually, I've got one answer for that. No, well, right after we finish, I'm going to, before I reset and start working again, I'm going to go on a really long walk. And that's
Nice.
one of the first things that I absolutely loved about moving to Italy is that I love the
Mm.
beauty. I love taking in sunlight. I love walking around. Even if I just walk around my block a few times, it really revitalizes me and
Hmm.
resets me. Physical exercise is something that I've really grown to appreciate as I've gotten older. It just helps with my brain and my cognitive. So I love to walk. But wait, what was the other thing you asked me?
And
Oh, my future.
your hope for the future, yeah.
My hope for the future is that travel with Tara, I can take along my really loyal and kind fan base. I've started a YouTube channel. I'm teaching myself how to film and edit as I travel, and it's
Fabulous.
going into production, but everyone's got their clothes on. And I'm traveling to different parts of the world. And, I'm really looking forward to spending these next years traveling, taking in new countries, new places, and taking all of my fans along with me. And I have to say, I thank you so much for having me and speaking with me and introducing me to your audience and your friends, because it opens up a whole new world for me as well. And I love these conversations. I think that it allows people to think. And sometimes you take away, okay, that's, I like that perspective, or that's a different perspective. And I think that that's why communicating and talking and sharing and this is
Yeah,
important.
that's why I really like doing this. Is that it's quite
And we get to know
we
each
haven't
other. You get to know
it's
somebody else, and
it's
you're
quite
like, you're
rare.
cool.
It's
You have a
quite
cool
rare you actually get
story.
to sit. Yeah, it's quite rare you actually get to sit and just talk to somebody for an hour and a half. Just have ask questions. Yeah, it's just a lovely way to meet somebody really.
I
And then
actually,
my final question. So we're at your 80th birthday party many years in the future. Firstly, thank you for inviting me. And then secondly, what would you like people to be saying about you then?
I'm going to be 80, huh? All 80, 80.
That's a long way in the future.
All right. I would like people to just say that I was kind, and that hopefully I left a good impression, maybe that I shared some knowledge with them, maybe allowed them to open their mind and their perspective and their heart a little bit. The true core of who I am is, I don't always think logically. I think empathetically. And in business early on, that was very difficult for me. But I learned a valuable lesson in that. It's that you really need to, you can assert your boundaries, but you can
Mhm.
also, your boundaries and your brain can be interconnected. And so I try to only focus on things that bring joy to my life. Not bury my head in the sand like an ostrich, but at my 80th birthday, I want to look back with no regrets. I want to be celebrating with you and everyone. And that we're just, we're in the maybe not the best place, but the right place, that I've arrived at the right place, surrounded by, yeah, people that understand me and hopefully that I've done good things for along the way.
Wow. That's an awesome answer.
I was,
Thank you so much.
yeah, no,
Sorry, you were going to say something else.
no,
Sorry.
I was just gonna say thank you because when you mentioned the big gulp, I remember when I went to Africa, there was a lovely boy, and he had only taken one trip, and it was to Los Angeles, and he was blown away by the big gulp. He was like, I went to 7-Eleven every day. It was so
It
cool. I
is
couldn't believe how many times I
staggering.
could refill the big gulp. And I
I
thought,
know.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of an amazing thing because it doesn't exist anywhere else in the world, but it's also so, so gluttonous. So I thought that was interesting that that was the one thing he shared with me.
It's weird. I remember the first time I went because we don't have fountain drinks in the UK at
Right.
all. So you go along and and I don't know why, you end up sort of mixing these random drinks together. It's like, what on earth is that? But
It's like a
it's
game.
fascinating. It is, yeah. Yeah, is Coke going to go with 7 Up, and is it going to go with Mountain Dew? Is it going to go with, yeah,
I mean, I'm
and
never
yeah.
offended. I will say America is wonky. I love when I meet people around the world and they tell me the most off random things about the US because it is unlike nothing else. And what people take away from it is it kind of makes me smile.
But there's such. I mean, it's obviously it's the size of Europe, so there's such a contrast between
Hmm.
some of the incredibly beautiful parks you have there, and lakes and seashores and incredible cities, and it is an amazing place. And I think people that say, "Oh, I don't like America," or "I do like America," it's just a weird thing to say because it's a bit like saying, "Oh, I don't like Europe,"
Yeah, it's
just because you've only ever
vast.
been to France. It's such a big. If you don't like America, just go and find somewhere else in America, because people are different all over the country. People are incredibly kind, incredibly generous, and it's a good place to be. But thank you
Thank
so much for your
you.
time. Enjoy your travels that are coming up,
Thank
and
you.
yeah, you've been fabulous.
And enjoy your time as well. And it was really lovely to meet you. And maybe we'll have another conversation again in the future.
I'd love
So,
that.
me too.